guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura. As some of you might know, I spent my exchange year in the USA, in Texas, a couple of years ago, and I'm sharing my experiences on this channel with you, so there is a lot of exchange student content floating around my channel. If you're interested in more videos, definitely check those out as well. Today, I am actually going to be talking about the topic of host families. Through these videos and through the comment sections on these videos, I've actually gotten in touch with so many members of former, future, and potential host families, and we've had really inspiring conversations, and they've asked me some questions that I've collected to answer them all in this host family Q&A. I will say that the conversations we had were super inspiring, and I actually started this channel with, you know, the perspective of helping out future exchange students, but I actually ended up realizing that there was a lot of potential to, you know, maybe help out some future host families as well. Today, I'm going to share my experience with my host family. Hopefully, this can help you out if you are planning to be a host family in the future, or maybe remind you of some of the really cool times that you had with your student if you already were a host family in the past. So without further ado, let's get right on into this video. The first question I got was about the good things that my host family did for me that are definitely worth replicating. So the first thing that I really appreciate that my host family did was they introduced me to absolutely everyone and anyone, whether it was their whole family, friends, family friends, or people at church or anywhere we went. Whenever they met somebody they knew, they would introduce me by my name and told them that I was an exchange student and that I was staying with them for an entire year, and that would be a really good conversation starter for me to get to know these people as well. It really helped me out. It kind of got over the first, you know, few awkward seconds, and it just made it so much easier for me to meet new people and to really feel integrated and appreciated. Another amazing thing that they did for me was that they actually provided me with my own room so that I had my own space, my own privacy. It was really useful for me because being an exchange student, there's so much going on inside your mind. You have to work through so many things. Obviously, being a teenager is just hard because your emotions are all over the place anyway. So having your own room is something that is not necessary but can definitely be super helpful to your student. So I'm very grateful that they provided me with my own room. It doesn't have to be the biggest room at all. It is just cool if you have your own space that you can make your own, that you can go into when you need a bit of space and a bit of alone time. Something that they also did, which I'm thankful for even today, is that they let me close my room door, which in Germany I'm used to closing my room door. Actually, my parents yell at me if I don't, and in the US I know that a lot of families like for their kids to keep the door open, but they knew that sometimes I just had to close the door. I just had to be completely by myself, and I really appreciate that they actually let me do that and that they were fine with it. Another amazing thing that they did was that they actually asked me so many questions about my home country, my culture, my family, and it just really, you know, gave us a lot to talk about. It really made me feel appreciated, and like I wasn't the only one who wanted to learn, but they also wanted to learn about my culture as well, and it made for some really lovely and interesting conversations. So I really appreciate that they did that. And generally speaking, I also really appreciate that they gave me a lot of freedom. I didn't technically have a curfew. Obviously, it has to, you know, work if both sides are super respectful. There don't have to be, you know, really set rules or anything, so it worked out pretty well, but they just generally give me a lot of freedom, and I didn't ever feel like the rules were restrictive at all. It just worked out really well. Moving on to kind of the opposite question, which is, are there any things that you wish they would have done differently? Connected to my last point is that I wish they would have told me about the rules that did exist. Granted, I don't think there were, you know, a lot of them, but there probably were some things that they wish I would have done, and I wish they would have laid it out clearer and just been like super open about what they expected of me. I think that is just really helpful. I probably did something that upset them, and that probably could have been prevented by, you know, talking about it and laying rules out. Even if they aren't super restrictive and super light or just suggestions, I think it's really good to talk to them beforehand about it. Another thing that is kind of a minor thing, but it is quite important because it happens right at the beginning. I wish they would have picked me up from the airport. I know that they were busy that day and they actually decided to take me in very much last minute, and they actually only decided to take me in for 4 weeks so that the organization could have time to find another host family for me. They actually ended up keeping me, which I will be forever grateful for, but it just meant that I didn't know who was going to pick me up. I just expected my host family to pick me up, and when I arrived at the airport, a friend of mine was picked up by their family, and you know, they had signs and balloons and everything, and just a strange woman that I had never met before walked up to me and was like, "Hey, you're Laura, are you coming with me?" And she ended up being, you know, my coordinator for my organization, but I just expected my host family to be there, and I felt from the get-go quite lonely and lost and kind of confused. And when I met them, it was really late at night and I'd already fallen asleep, so I just felt like I wasn't able to make a good first impression. So I wish they would have picked me up from the airport, but sometimes, no, that isn't possible. Another thing that I wish they would have done more is to come to my volleyball games. My host siblings were basketball players, and that was later on in the season, so I actually went to a lot of their games. Like, even I was present at most of their games, and their parents were present, I would say, at every single one of their games, or like 90% of their games at least. And I remember that my host mother, at least, or maybe my host parents, came to like one of my volleyball games out of like 50 or something. So I just wish that they had shown me more support in that. They would have showed up for me more there. I never talked to them about it. I was too shy to ask them to come. I wasn't a good player anyway, but I wish they would have showed up for that as much as they showed up for their own children, or at least half as much. You know, that's something that came to my mind when I read this question. It wasn't the worst of things at all. I didn't like hold a grudge or hold it against them at all. It's just something, if you asked me what they could have done better, I wish they would have come to my games more. The next thing I was asked is, was there a cultural barrier that you experienced? This isn't directly related to host families, however, I did think it was useful to include it in this video because most of these things are things that host families could really help you out. So definitely, I would say I didn't encounter much of a barrier when it came to language. I had started learning English in 3rd grade, so obviously, you know, around the household there were loads of things I didn't know the names to, but I just, you know, learned them as I went along. What I would say is that there was definitely a huge cultural barrier when it came to things like clothing or just behavioral like rules and society rules that I just didn't know, and that people would oftentimes not tell me. A couple of weeks in, or even months, I found out that I actually didn't dress appropriately for church, but my host family would see me every single morning before church and take me to church with them and never say anything about it. And I just wish they would have spoken up and told me, you know, you can wear these things to school or to church and you cannot wear these things. And I just didn't know, and I just went, and people were probably staring at me and thinking, why is she wearing a dress like that or a top like that, when it could have been prevented by my host family just speaking up and telling me, you know, to wear something different. So that is something that probably could have helped me out. Also, not necessarily my host parents, but my host siblings could have helped me out with the simple things in school, like finding, you know, my classrooms, or I never learned how to open a locker actually because nobody really took enough time for me to figure it out and to show me. So that is something that my host siblings maybe could have helped me out with, that I never actually learned. Generally speaking, I a lot of the time felt like I was playing a game that I didn't know the rules to. So if you find that your exchange student is kind of shy or unsure about certain situations, you know, just show them the way, kind of tell them about the rules, make them ask loads of questions, or ask them questions to find out what they might be unsure about or what they might have questions about, because they might be really shy in the beginning, especially to ask you all of these questions because they don't want to annoy you or over ask. So, you know, just kind of poke for the questions and see where they might need support, advice, or help. Moving on to the next question, which was, what was the coolest thing that they did for you? So one thing I've kind of touched on was that they actually decided to keep me for longer than 4 weeks. Initially, they were just kind of my host family for the first 4 weeks so that my organization was able to find someone else for me who could take me on permanently. However, they actually, you know, after like 2 weeks or so decided to keep me permanently because it worked out, and I'm so grateful for them for taking the time and the energy and everything it took to make sure that I could stay with them for the whole year. The next thing I would say, which I already touched on as well, is that they gave me so much freedom. I never felt like any many rules in the household were restricting, but the coolest thing overall I think my host parents especially did was that they joked around with me. They were so cool, and even when I went back like 1.5 to 2 years ago now and went to see them again, we just have a really fun, open relationship. I almost feel like they're more my friends than like a parent. We just have a really nice relationship, and we can have really good and interesting talks, and so I think that was probably the best thing that they did for me. Now, a question I was nervous to talk about was what was the worst thing that they did. I would say the worst thing that my host parents did was they didn't really communicate well with my host siblings when they decided to keep me. I think that was probably an issue because my whole, you know, finding a host family situation was quite last minute, and so I felt like right from the beginning my host siblings weren't quite as on board with me living in their home as my host parents were, and that led to some uncomfortable situations and some conflict because I felt like they weren't really ready for an exchange student. They didn't really want me there, and so, you know, that led to some really uncomfortable situations. So I wish they could have communicated with their kids better and like really got them on board to host an exchange student, but I can't really blame them for that because I think that was mostly because the decision was made so last minute so that they could host me and be a family for me in the first place. So if you're wanting to be a host family, make sure that you talk to every single person in the household and make sure they're 100% on board. Otherwise, that can lead to some very uncomfortable situations. Another question was, how was your relationship with your host parents? I would say, generally speaking, my relationship with my host parents was really good. As I said, we just joked around. We had really interesting conversations. You know, they always made me feel welcome, and yeah, we had a really good relationship. We still talk sometimes, you know, throughout the year whenever there's like birthdays or holidays, or they post something and I comment or we get into a conversation. So overall, we had a really good relationship, my host parents and I. It was also quite a relaxed relationship. I never called them sir or ma'am at all, which I know that a lot of people do. I never did that. We weren't, you know, that formal with each other, but on the other hand, I also didn't call them mom or dad, which I know that some families also do. We never felt like that was, you know, what we should be doing. I just called them by their first names. I felt like mom and dad was a bit too personal, especially in the beginning, because you start out as like strangers, so it would feel very weird for me to call someone mom or dad that I just met, you know, like 10 days ago. So if that happens naturally throughout the year, I think that's fine, but especially in the beginning when you don't even really know each other, that just kind of felt uncomfortable. And the last question is, did you integrate well into their family? I would say overall, yes. As I said, there were, you know, some issues with my host siblings, so that didn't always go as well as it probably should have or could have gone, but there were definitely, as in your own family at home, family members, some that you just get closer to naturally, that you're drawn to, that you're just kind of on the same frequency. I had an aunt, an host aunt, and a host niece, for example, that were super lovely, super interested. I loved my little niece. She was probably maybe 8 at the time, and yeah, I loved, you know, like doing her hair, and she loved to ask me loads of questions, so that was amazing. My host grandparents were also lovely. They invited us over to their house a lot and cooked, and also, you know, asked loads of questions, and they were just super lovely. So overall, I would say I integrated into their family really well, besides maybe the whole siblings relationship, but that's a whole different story, and I don't know if I will ever talk about it, but overall, I would say that the family was really nice to me and made efforts to really integrate me into their family. I hope that I was able to help you out, whether you are a former member of a host family, a future or a potential member of a host family, or an exchange student watching this video, or just someone who is generally just interested in the topic. If you have any other questions, please leave them down in the comments below. I can definitely make a part 2 of this. Maybe this video will also trigger you to ask other questions or to have other video suggestions or ideas. I will be so happy to make any kind of videos that you're interested in seeing. If I can help you out in any way, please let me know. Other than that, if you want to never miss out on any of my future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you always keep updated when I post next. And lastly, I have nothing left to say but to thank you so much for watching this video, for taking the time out of your day to support me and this channel, and I hope you stick around, and I will see you soon. I love you so much. Bye!